Sarah Chin was the best pilot in the Air Force until they called her too dangerous and kicked her out. Now she watches other pilots fly while she sits in a control tower. But when a massive cargo plane starts falling from the sky, only Sarah knows how to save it. Before watching full story, comment below from where are you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. Sarah Chin had been the youngest pilot ever to command a C-17 cargo plane. At 28 she was flying missions across the world, carrying soldiers and supplies to dangerous places. Her fellow pilots respected her skills, but they also feared her methods. Sarah never flew like the other pilots. When storms came, she would find ways through them that others called impossible. When engines failed, she would push her aircraft beyond what the manual said was safe. When emergencies happened, Sarah would try things that made her commanders nervous. Chin takes too many risks, Colonel Martinez had written in her evaluation. She endangers lives with her wild flying methods. She thinks rules don't apply to her. The final incident happened over Afghanistan. Sarah's C-17 was carrying wounded soldiers back to Germany when both engines on the left wing failed. Standard procedure was to declare an emergency and land at the nearest airport. But the nearest safe airport was 3 hours away, and 2 of the wounded soldiers were dying. Sarah made a decision that ended her career. She flew her damaged aircraft through a mountain pass that was officially marked as too dangerous for large aircraft. The mountains were covered in clouds and radar couldn't see through them. Other pilots said it was suicide to attempt the pass with a damaged plane. But Sarah knew her aircraft better than anyone. She knew exactly how much stress the C-17 could handle. She flew by instinct and experience, threading her massive cargo plane between mountain peaks that she couldn't even see. She saved 2 lives that day. Both wounded soldiers survived because Sarah got them to medical care 2 hours faster than anyone thought possible. But her commanders only saw a pilot who had broken safety rules and risked dozens of lives on a dangerous gamble. 3 weeks later, Sarah Chin was grounded permanently. Her pilot's license was suspended, and she was discharged from the Air Force with a black mark on her record that would follow her forever. 3 years passed slowly. Sarah found work as an air traffic controller at Denver International Airport. It was steady work, but every day she watched other pilots take off into the sky while she stayed trapped on the ground. "Good morning, Sarah," said Mike Rodriguez, her supervisor. Mike was a kind man who understood what it felt like to lose something you loved. He had been a pilot once too, before an injury ended his flying career. "Morning, Mike," Sarah replied, settling into her chair in the control tower. Through the large windows she could see aircraft preparing for takeoff. Each one was a reminder of what she had lost. The other controllers treated her with polite distance. They knew her story. Everyone in aviation knew about Sarah Chin. Some felt sorry for her. Others believed she had gotten what she deserved. A few whispered that she was lucky no one had died because of her reckless flying. "Maybe it's time to think about a different career," Mike had suggested once. "Flying isn't everything in life." But Mike was wrong. For Sarah, flying was everything. It was who she was, not just what she did. Sarah had tried to find work with commercial airlines, but her military record followed her everywhere. No airline wanted to hire a pilot who had been discharged for being too dangerous. Even small cargo companies turned her away. "We need pilots who follow procedures," one hiring manager had told her. "We can't take risks with someone who has your reputation." So Sarah guided other people's flights from the ground, watching them live the life she desperately wanted back. It was a clear Tuesday morning in October when everything changed. Sarah was handling routine traffic, commercial flights taking off and landing, small private planes requesting permission to enter Denver airspace. Nothing unusual or exciting. Then her radio crackled with panic. "Mayday. Mayday. This is Air Force Cargo 1-7. We have multiple engine failures. Hydraulic systems are failing. We're going down." Sarah's hands moved faster than thought. All her training from years of flying and 3 years of air traffic control kicked in instantly. "Air Force Cargo 1-7, this is Denver Approach Control. What is your current position and how many people are on board?" The voice that came back was tight with fear. 23 souls on board. We're flying over Highway 36, west of Boulder. We're losing altitude fast. The controls are barely responding." Sarah looked at her radar screen. The aircraft symbol was dropping rapidly, much faster than any normal descent. Those numbers told her this was a real emergency, not just a minor mechanical problem. "Cargo 1-7, the nearest suitable airport is Centennial Field, about 15 miles to the southeast. Can you make it that far?" "Negative. We're losing over 1,000 feet every minute. This plane is coming down whether we want it to or not." Sarah felt her heart start racing. A descent rate of 1,000 feet per minute meant the aircraft was in serious trouble. They had maybe 5 or 6 minutes before they would be forced to crash land somewhere. What type of aircraft are you flying, Cargo 1-7? C-17 Globemaster III. We're carrying a full cargo load. The plane is too heavy and too damaged. We need somewhere to put down right now. When she heard C-17, Sarah's blood went cold. That was her aircraft, the plane she had flown for 8 years before they grounded her. She knew every system, every limitation, every capability of the C-17 better than any other controller in the building. But landing a massive military cargo plane anywhere except a prepared runway? Everyone knew that was impossible. C-17s needed long, strong runways and perfect conditions to land safely. Mike rushed over to Sarah's workstation when he heard the emergency call. Sarah, direct them to Peterson Air Force Base. Let the military handle their own emergency. But Sarah was already studying her computer screens, looking at maps and traffic patterns. Highway 36 ran straight as an arrow for miles between Boulder and Denver. It was 8 lanes wide, much wider than a normal road. The surface was smooth asphalt and the terrain was relatively flat. Cargo 1-7, confirm that you cannot reach any airport facility? Confirmed. We have maybe 4 minutes before we lose complete control of the aircraft. We're looking at a certain crash into populated areas. Sarah closed her eyes and pictured the C-17 specifications that were burned into her memory from years of flying. Length, 174 feet. Wingspan, 170 feet. Normal landing speed, around 115 knots minimum. But with engine failures and damaged flaps, they would probably need to land at closer to 160 knots, nearly 200 miles per hour. Sarah patched them through to Air Force Command. This isn't our problem, Mike insisted. But Sarah was pulling up maps and traffic cameras on her computer screens. Highway 36 between Boulder and Denver. Long, straight, and just maybe wide enough for a desperate landing attempt. Cargo 1-7, I need to know your exact position over Highway 36. We're about 10 miles west of Boulder, following the highway eastbound. Why do you need to know that? Sarah took a deep breath. She was about to suggest something that had never been attempted with an aircraft this large. Cargo 1-7, there might be one option available to you. But it's very unconventional and has never been tried with your type of aircraft. Denver Control, whatever you've got, we'll take it. We're running out of altitude and options fast. Highway 36 runs straight east from your current position. It's 8 lanes total, approximately 120 feet wide. Complete silence on the radio. Then, say again, Denver Control? Highway 36. It's straight, it's long, and given your current rate of descent, it may be your only option for survival. Are you seriously suggesting we land a C-17 on a public highway? Mike grabbed Sarah's shoulder firmly. Sarah, stop this immediately. You're not qualified to give that kind of guidance anymore. You're not even a pilot. I'm the most qualified person in this building for this situation. I have over 2,000 hours flying C-17s. The entire control room fell silent. Everyone turned to stare at Sarah. They all knew her reputation and her history, but hearing her claim expertise in an emergency made them uncomfortable. Cargo 1-7, I have extensive experience in your aircraft type. A highway landing is theoretically possible with precise speed and altitude management. Denver Control, identify yourself. Who exactly are we talking to? Sarah hesitated for just a moment. Her name carried weight in aviation circles, but not the good kind of weight. This is Sarah Chin, Denver Approach Control. A long pause. She could hear muffled discussion in the cockpit. Sarah Chin? The Air Force pilot who got discharged for reckless flying. The words hit her like a physical blow, but Sarah pushed forward. 23 lives were at stake and personal feelings didn't matter. Affirmative. And right now, I'm the only person available who understands your aircraft well enough to help you survive this emergency. More discussion in the cockpit. Every military pilot knew her story. The hotshot who pushed too hard, broke too many rules, and finally went too far and lost everything. Denver? Sarah? We're passing through 5,000 feet and losing hydraulic pressure rapidly. If you really believe you can help us, we're willing to listen. Sarah felt her old confidence returning. This was what she had lived for during her flying career. The moment when everything went wrong and only skill and determination could save the day. Cargo 1-7, first priority is establishing Highway 36 as your extended final approach course. Use the road as your navigation reference. Roger that. We're following Highway 36 eastbound. What's your current rate of descent? 1,400 feet per minute and increasing. We can't maintain level flight at all. That was too fast. Much too fast for any kind of controlled landing attempt. You need to reduce that descent rate immediately. Use whatever elevator authority you have remaining. Trade airspeed for vertical speed control. When we pull back on the controls, the nose wants to pitch up too much. That's normal with hydraulic system failure. Make small, gentle inputs on the controls. Don't fight the aircraft's natural tendencies, work with them instead. Sarah closed her eyes, visualizing the C-17 cockpit layout. She knew the location of every switch, every display, every control surface from years of experience. What's your status on manual reversion? Sarah asked. We have manual reversion on elevator and rudder controls. Ailerons are sluggish but still responding to our inputs. That's excellent news. That manual reversion is your lifeline right now. Now listen carefully. Landing on a highway presents unique challenges that you won't find in any manual. You'll encounter power lines, overpass structures, traffic signals, and civilian vehicles. You need to identify the clearest possible approach corridor. Mike was on the phone with his supervisors, frantically explaining the situation. From his facial expression, Sarah could tell the conversation wasn't going well. But she ignored the politics and focused on the emergency. Cargo 1 to 7, what's your current fuel state? Approximately 18,000 pounds remaining. We've been dumping fuel when we can, but we're still significantly over maximum landing weight. Sarah did rapid calculations in her head. They were still far too heavy for any kind of short-field landing attempt. A fully loaded C-17 normally required at least 3,000 feet of runway to stop safely, even under perfect conditions. Can you continue dumping fuel? Negative. The fuel dump system is not responding to commands. Sarah studied her radar display. The aircraft was passing through 3,500 feet, still flying over densely populated suburban areas. Cargo 1 to 7, you need to accept that this approach will be fast and the landing roll will be very long. Your touchdown speed will be approximately 160 knots. 160 knots on a highway surface? That's nearly 200 miles per hour. Confirmed. But C-17 landing gear is specifically designed for rough field operations. The aircraft can handle it if you can. Mike returned from his phone call looking pale and worried. Sarah, the regional administrator wants this operation terminated immediately. He says you're exceeding your authority. Sarah ignored him completely, keeping her focus entirely on the emergency aircraft and the people whose lives hung in the balance. Cargo 1 to 7, you need to coordinate with Colorado State Patrol immediately. Request emergency closure of Highway 36 from Boulder to Westminster. How do we coordinate that? Declare Pan-Pan on guard frequency 121.5. Tell them you're executing emergency landing procedures and need immediate highway clearance. They'll coordinate with local law enforcement agencies. Sarah switched to her emergency coordination frequency, contacting state police directly. Within 3 minutes, patrol cars were racing toward highway access points to begin clearing traffic. Sarah. Mike shouted across the control room. The regional administrator is demanding to speak with you directly. Tell him that 23 people are about to die, and ask whether he wants to explain to their families why we didn't attempt every possible option to save them. She switched back to the aircraft frequency. Cargo 1 to 7, current altitude and position report? 2,800 feet, approximately 5 miles west of Boulder. We can see the highway clearly now. There are still a lot of vehicles on the roadway. State police units are responding to clear traffic. Continue your approach using the highway centerline as your runway alignment. Sarah, we have to ask, why exactly were you removed from flight status? Even in the middle of a life-or-death emergency, her reputation followed her everywhere. But this time, Sarah answered with complete honesty. I was removed from flight status because I was willing to take calculated risks that other pilots considered too dangerous. Because I pushed aircraft beyond normal operational limits when lives were hanging in the balance. And what exactly are you asking us to do now? I'm asking you to trust that sometimes the impossible is just difficult, and sometimes difficult is exactly what saves lives. Through the traffic camera network, Sarah could see emergency vehicles positioning themselves along the highway. Red and blue lights flashed everywhere as police worked frantically to clear civilian traffic from the landing zone. Cargo 1 to 7, post-touchdown procedures will be absolutely critical. What's your brake system status? We have hydraulic pressure-to-wheel brakes, but the anti-skid system is completely inoperative. Maximum braking will likely result in tire failure. Sarah's stomach dropped. Without anti-skid protection, heavy braking on asphalt at 160 knots would almost certainly blow out multiple tires. But without maximum braking, they would never stop before hitting buildings and populated areas. You'll have to accept tire failure as an acceptable risk. Better to destroy tires on the ground than to crash into structures. Understood. We're committed now. Sarah switched frequencies to coordinate with emergency response teams positioned along the highway. All emergency vehicles, be advised the aircraft will touch down at approximately 160 knots and will require a minimum of 6,000 feet to achieve full stop. Position yourselves well clear of the approach and landing zones. Back to the aircraft. Cargo 1 to 7, report current altitude. 2,100 feet and descending. We're aligned with Highway 36. Sarah, we can see several overpass structures directly ahead. Sarah quickly pulled up satellite imagery and bridge clearance data on her computer system. I have the overpass information pulled up. You'll need to carefully time your descent profile to pass safely underneath them. What's your aircraft height from bottom of landing gear to top of vertical stabilizer? Approximately 55 feet total height. Sarah zoomed in on the satellite maps, making rapid calculations for clearance margins. The highway overpasses show 17 feet of vertical clearance above the road surface. You'll need to be in ground effect to clear them safely. Ground effect at our approach speed? That's extremely dangerous flying. Everything about this entire approach is dangerous. But ground effect will also help reduce your sink rate and extend your glide distance. Through multiple traffic cameras positioned along the highway, Sarah watched the massive C-17 appearing in the distance. Against the landscape of suburban Denver, it looked impossibly huge, like a flying building approaching the ground. Denver Control, we're fully committed to this approach now. There's no turning back. Copy that, Cargo 1 to 7. Your approach profile looks excellent from here. Maintain centerline alignment and steady airspeed. Sarah watched her camera feeds as panicked drivers pulled their cars to the shoulders of the highway. Some vehicles were still moving, their drivers apparently unaware of the approaching aircraft. All police units, aircraft is on short final approach. Clear all remaining vehicles from the highway immediately. Back to the aircraft. Cargo 1 to 7, report your approach speed. 165 knots and holding steady. We're approaching the first overpass structure now. Sarah held her breath as she watched the camera feeds. The enormous military transport filled her screen, flying barely 20 feet above the highway surface. Looking good, Cargo 1 to 7. You're going to clear that bridge with room to spare. The aircraft thundered beneath the overpass structure with only a few feet of clearance above and below. We made it under. But Sarah, we're approaching more populated areas ahead. If we can't get this aircraft stopped, you will get it stopped. The moment your main landing gear touches that asphalt, apply maximum braking force. Don't hesitate because of tire concerns. Roger that. We can see our touchdown zone ahead. Highway appears to be clear of traffic now. Sarah watched the final approach on 6 different camera angles. The C-17 looked like something from a science fiction movie, its 170-foot wingspan nearly covering the entire width of the 8-lane highway. Cargo 1 to 7, you're looking perfect on approach. 50 feet above ground level, 30 feet, 20 feet. The massive aircraft touched down on Highway 36 with tremendous force. Sparks erupted from the landing gear as rubber tires met asphalt at nearly 200 miles per hour. We're on the ground. We're on the ground. But the aircraft was still moving at incredible speed. Sarah watched in fascination and terror as the C-17 thundered down the highway, leaving smoking tire tracks on the asphalt behind it. Maximum braking. Give me everything you have. Through her cameras, Sarah could see the aircraft gradually slowing, but not nearly fast enough. Shopping centers and office buildings loomed ahead in the distance. Brakes are beginning to fade. We're still carrying too much speed. Sarah's mind raced through every technique she knew for emergency stopping procedures. Do you have any nose wheel steering authority available? Very limited. There's a slight uphill grade approximately 2,000 feet ahead of your current position. Use that elevation change to help dissipate your remaining speed. The aircraft began climbing the gentle incline, trading kinetic energy for potential energy. Sarah watched the speed indicators gradually decrease as the C-17 rolled uphill. After what felt like an eternity, the massive transport finally rolled to a complete stop in the middle of Highway 36. Silence on the radio. Then quietly, Denver Control, we're stopped. We actually made it. Cheers erupted throughout the control tower. Controllers who had been holding their breath for 10 minutes suddenly started breathing again. Sarah collapsed back in her chair, emotionally and physically drained from the most intense emergency of her career. Cargo 1 to 7 emergency response teams are approaching your position. Report the status of all passengers and crew. Stand by while we conduct a head count. Denver, we're showing no serious injuries among passengers or crew members. Everyone is walking around and talking. We actually pulled this impossible landing off. More cheers filled the control room. Mike placed his hand on Sarah's shoulder, his earlier skepticism completely gone. That was absolutely incredible guidance, Sarah. I've never seen anything like it. Sarah stared at her radar screen, where the aircraft symbol had finally stopped moving after its impossible journey from the sky to a highway. It wasn't just guidance, Mike. It was teamwork between professionals who refused to give up when lives were on the line. Within an hour, news helicopters were circling overhead. Video footage of the highway landing was being broadcast around the world. The massive military transport sitting in the middle of Highway 36 looked like something from a science fiction movie. Captain Rodriguez, the aircraft commander, gave interviews to every news organization that would listen. We never could have accomplished this without the air traffic controller who guided us through that approach. Sarah Chin saved 23 lives today with her knowledge, skill, and courage. When reporters asked about Sarah's controversial background and her discharge from the Air Force, Rodriguez looked directly into the cameras with conviction. I've heard people call Sarah Chin reckless. I've heard them say she was dangerous and unfit to fly. But I'll tell you what I know from personal experience. Sometimes what looks like recklessness to people who play it safe is exactly the kind of creative thinking that saves lives when everything goes wrong. Sarah Chin isn't reckless. She's fearless when it counts. And today, that fearlessness brought 23 people home alive to their families. Sarah watched the news coverage from her small apartment that evening. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing since the landing. Job offers from major airlines. Interview requests from news programs. Congratulations from former colleagues who had avoided her for 3 long years. But the phone call that mattered most came just before midnight. Sarah, this is General Patricia Morrison from Air Mobility Command Headquarters. Sarah immediately recognized the name. General Morrison had been one of the senior officers who signed her dismissal papers 3 years ago. Good evening, General. I've been watching the news coverage of today's emergency landing. That was exceptional airmanship guidance under impossible circumstances. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. Sarah, I want to ask you a direct question. If the Air Force offered you an opportunity to return to active flying status, would you be interested in that possibility? Sarah walked to her window and looked out at the airport in the distance. Aircraft were taking off and landing, their navigation lights twinkling like stars against the darkness. General, with all due respect, I never stopped being a pilot. I just stopped having access to aircraft. Would you like to change that situation permanently? For the first time in 3 years, Sarah smiled with genuine happiness and hope for the future. Yes, ma'am. I absolutely would like that chance. 8 months later, Sarah was back in the left seat of a C-17, this time as an instructor pilot training the next generation of military aviators. But her teaching approach was different from traditional flight instructors. Flying by regulations and procedures is absolutely essential, she told her students during ground school sessions. But regulations and procedures can't possibly cover every emergency situation you might encounter. Sometimes you have to write new procedures in real time to save lives. She looked each young pilot directly in the eyes. The difference between reckless flying and courageous flying isn't about avoiding all risks. It's about taking the right risks at the right time for the right reasons. That's what being a true professional pilot really means. One student raised her hand with a question. Captain Chin, how do you know when it's appropriate to exceed normal operational limits? Sarah thought about Highway 36. About 23 people who went home to their families because someone was willing to attempt something that seemed impossible. You'll know when the time comes, she replied with confidence. When lives are hanging in the balance and conventional thinking isn't enough to solve the problem, you'll discover what you're truly capable of achieving. As her C-17 climbed into the clear blue sky over Colorado, Sarah felt complete for the first time since her dismissal. Being grounded hadn't made her less of a pilot. It had taught her to be a better one. Sometimes the very qualities that get you in trouble are exactly what the world needs most when everything goes wrong. Sarah Chin had been called reckless, dangerous, unprofessional, and unfit to fly. But 23 people called her something else entirely. They called her the person who saved their lives.